Hi, this is Joe Daniels. Over the past 4 years, I've had the opportunity to work with some fantastic artists and engineers, all the while animating in virtual reality. Pre-production is one aspect of making animated content that can greatly benefit from art that's created in 3D space. Even though that may sound daunting or like something from some bizarre science fiction movie. Today we're going to take on the challenge of creating a story sequence for a winter-themed fairy tale. And we're going to generate a rough thumbnail storyboard pass, all the while drawing and posing our drawings in 3D. Can we pull it off? Let's hop into VR and find out. So here I have a Magic Wizard's hat. And I also have some story prompts that I've prepared. I have some characters, some locations, and some magic objects. And what I'm going to do is put them all in the hat and pick some out until we can have enough to tell a story here. Let's go ahead and grab these, and we'll kind of stack them together. And then we'll put them all, shrink them down, and stick them into the hat. And now I'll reach and grab some out. So for our first one, we have, a magic potion. Okay, so we're going to do something with a magic potion. In an enchanted forest. Okay, our main character is a lonely prince. Okay, something is beneath a frozen lake. Okay, so looking at these cards, we've picked out a lonely prince beneath the frozen lake in an enchanted forest, and there's something with a magic potion. Alright, so this lonely prince here, why is he lonely? Let's kind of sketch out this character here. Maybe he's got, it's an enchanted forest, it's frozen lake, it's winter time. Maybe he has some type of hood on and like a big cloak of some sort. And we'll give him like a crown so that we know that he's a prince. I'm just kind of sketching out my thoughts here. Alright, so we've got a prince, and there's a frozen lake in an enchanted forest. He needs a magic potion to do something. So I guess then one question would be, what is beneath the frozen lake? Okay, so something's beneath the frozen lake, and it has made him lonely. So let's think about that. Okay, so maybe, under this frozen lake, Okay, I'm thinking, so lonely, that's connected to love, right? Maybe he has lost somebody that is beneath the frozen lake, and he needs a magic potion. Maybe he needs this magic potion to bring this person back around. This person he's lost his love. Okay, cool. So we've got, now that's a kind of an interesting idea. I like, at least it's interesting to me. I like that we've got we've got a frozen queen, or princess, I guess, and she's underneath and he's going to come and put a potion that's going to cause her to rise up and come back to life, or at least maybe her spirit comes back in a sense. I don't know. Okay, I feel like this is a nugget of a story that we can work with, and so I'm excited to tell this in VR and see how working spatially like this can help us tell stories. Let's board this out. We'll start sketching it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new scene. This is our world space to create in. And I'm also going to bring in an image. I'm prepped ahead of time a couple of background images that are going to just work for a snowy environment. Let's bring those in as a skybox. And then I have a paint layer. So here I can start sketching. I'm going to start by drawing our king character. And just kind of, not king, prince. There we go. All right, so we've got this. Maybe I'll give him just like a short, stubbly beard, and we'll give him a nose. So he's got like this little bit of a mustache, beard. Just gonna sketch this in 3D space, and yeah, there we go. Come in here and play with proportions, but I think to get us started right at the beginning, that's probably good enough. We've got a bit of a face there, and maybe gonna make this smaller. And then I'm just gonna, I can delete these lines later, but let me just quickly block in with one single stroke, kind of a bit of body. Think about chest, legs. He's got some boots. Yeah. All right. So we've got character here. Kind of make him confident, chest out character. And that cape we were talking about. He's a regal character. He should probably have some type of a cape here. And that could be fun, because if it's winter, we add some snow, we can have this cape flapping in the breeze. Alright, so there we go. We've got a really simple prince, and let's then sketch this princess that he's lost, that he's going to bring back. I want to go with maybe blues for him and pinks and purples for her. I'm going to stay with very simple drawing for this. But I think I'm going to go with a bit of like a spirit kind of, her spirit is coming back to life, and maybe she's got a little bit of glow to her or something. And I'm going to go with just shapes that read as quickly as possible, just so that at the first glance that you see, we know who she is. So we'll have her hair kind of being up in a bun, and maybe she also has a bit of a tiara kind of a thing. That's my best tiara for right now. There we go. All right. She's been sleeping. Okay. All right, so there is a shape at least that feels somewhat feminine. I love being able to just, almost kind of like the liquify tool in Photoshop. I can come in here and play with proportions. Yeah. Some curves that go that way. All right, so now we have some really simple characters that we can use to block in the basics of our story here. I may just go in and block in just some fills for the character. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be anything more than just, this first pass is going to be kind of a thumbnail sketch of what this story could be. Great. All right, I'm excited. So we have these two characters. let's start to plot out some environment here. Really, really rough. He is going through the enchanted forest to the frozen lake. All right, so frozen lake. There's a frozen lake. And we definitely want the center of it to be where he has to go to use the magic potion that he has brought. So he's coming through the snow against all odds. Very kind of stereotypical, he's got to save the main character kind of a story, which for this nice short piece I think is going to end up working pretty well. And one of the really cool things about this is as I'm starting to block this in and really think about where this all can fit, I'm finding solutions for how the scale of how a 3D environment could potentially look. All right, so we've got, I would imagine we've got mounds of snow leading up to this frozen lake. Yeah, and then, all right, our hero is going to come from right to left into this space. So let's maybe block in the idea of some trees. And I'm thinking, let's just go with some very simple kind of pine tree shapes, right? It doesn't have to be anything super amazing. Again, I'm just trying to block in thumbnail sketch, get this idea in, and see if it even works. So I drew this in kind of one stroke, so it was nice and easy to select. And then, just duplicate these around a bit. Now that I've got a handful of them, duplicate these. Play with their orientation, and let's bring some into the foreground. And he needs to come through the trees. All right. And, maybe there's a slight kind of pathway through the forest that he's traveling along. And this will help us kind of get some sense of this space and how big it is, how treacherous it is. Okay, cool. So, just sketching some lines in here. Yeah, we've got a forest. So I can already see that I can start to think about cameras, I can start to think about scale. Let's think about, all right, so he's going to come in here. She is underneath the lake. That's going to be fun. We'll be able to have some fun with this, I think. Okay. All right, so we've got this space. And maybe a couple more trees over here. All right. Yep, and let's maybe sketch a little bit more of a sense of environment. I'm thinking if our hero's coming left to right into this space, all of our cameras are going to be kind of looking at it from here all the way to there. So I'm thinking about what do we need in the background, and maybe we want kind of a nice mountain range off in the distance. And let's see, maybe we just do a few really simple trees. Let's see what that looks like. Cool, getting a little bit more depth there. That's fun. And then, I'm not going to noodle on this too much, but if we want some more variation, It's pretty easy to just come in here and do that. Cool. I think at this point, I'm going to name him. So this is our prince. This is our princess. And this is our environment sketch. Okay, so we have that environment. We have our two characters. I'm going to move the characters up. Usually think kind of top to bottom. So the princess is down here. All right, and let's start thinking about what the prince is going to do. So we want him to start maybe out here, and we want a few shots of him, trudging through the snow until he gets up to that space. Of course, we can change the background shot by shot, just like you would in drawing a storyboard. But let's kind of think about, with the time that we have here, I think we can show walking through. Maybe blizzard is blasting him back, and he gets to the lake and is going to save her. For this, let's actually go in here and think about, all right, he's coming through the snow. We've got this cape, this really nice cape. Let's have this kind of blowing back this way. Depending on how I drew it, I did draw it all in one line, so it can be tricky to pose this sketch. I'm not really going to worry about that too much. From where we are right now, let's start to think about camera. So one cool thing that we can do is we can create a new camera and start to position it in here. I'm going to choose maybe a larger lens. Maybe we'll go start with a 35mm lens, a nice wide camera angle here. Stick that in, and the first thing I usually do is I just leave it here, and I don't animate it right away, and I try to see how my poses are looking towards that camera. So the way that I do that is I have this viewer that as the animation plays, I can always just flip my wrist up, and I can see what this camera over here is seeing of my scene. All right, this is going to look really rough at first, but I think something that will really help us is if we add some snow. So that is actually a remarkably easy task. I'm going to create some empty frames. For this scene, I'm going to work at 12 frames per second, so half of what you might normally on a feature film. That way I don't have to do tons and tons of drawings, and it'll be easier to retime. Let's grab an appropriate snow-like color. One of the really cool things that you can do is you can push play, and you can see the animation is playing back frame by frame. And if I draw, I'm drawing into these frames, right? So just everything I draw, whatever it is, nice big circle like that, the snow is going to flow along that path. So I'm going to undo a couple of those, and let's get down here kind of on his level. And we'll start to just fill in the scene with some snow. All right, so, all right, it's real blizzard. So what's amazing about this is, I don't even have to I don't need a particle system. I don't need to use anything other than my hand to just draw where I'd like the snow to go. So I can do this, just tracing back, forth, adding more and more snow, making it harder and harder for my hero. Okay, and let's take a look. So through our camera, yeah, there we go. We can see something. So our camera's right here. Let's also, you have to make the sound effects. I don't know how to. It's like playing with my toys as a kid. I can get down here on his level and watch that snow wisp by. And I think at this stage it would be helpful to throw in a ground plane so that I'm putting my characters on a reasonable plane. Okay, so again, this is just going to be really rough. Really big brush strokes where I don't need to care too much. There's a shading setting that lets me see a little bit more clearly what I'm trying to achieve here. Okay, great. So I have a ground. It looks quite nasty, but in this I don't need to see the shading. I can just let this be just like a painting, only the color of my strokes are shown. So I can turn that off, and now we can't see, this just looks like character on a ground here. I'm liking it. All right, so this is going to be enough for us to really start to get in here and start to tell the story. I think what I will also do is put in the ice itself, just a kind of sheet of mostly transparent, but slightly maybe darkly colored, and use the line tool so that I can just drag out a single line here. So our queen is underneath the ice. And I think we'll be able to start going a little bit faster now that we have this all laid out. So I'll take the prince, and let's go back to the beginning of our animation, and let's say maybe this holds for a couple frames, and then I want to let him take a step forward. And I'm going to make sure that my onion skin's on. And maybe temporarily I'll turn off this fills layer so it makes it easier for me to see my onion skin. Okay, so all right, on this frame he goes a little bit forward, and let that hold for a little bit. Let's take a look at that. Hop back to the beginning and we'll push play. All right, so we have a kind of an establishing shot here for this camera. Let's take that and I'll just duplicate it so I don't have to do this again. I'll extend my range out a little so that when we get to this frame, what I can do is take that layer and just pull it forward. All right, so let's see what that looks like. Forward, forward, forward. Okay, that's great. So what I like about having this now is that I can start to think about the other cameras that I might want to put down. So let's take this camera and I'll just duplicate it. I could add another camera, but let's call this one camera 2. And pull it down here. And here, so what I want to do with this shot is I want to show us our hero doing his heroic thing. All right, so one of the really neat things that we can start to do now that we have these two cameras is I can even start to edit this together in VR as I'm drawing. So if I bring up my timeline here, I have a theater view that I can just stick up here, up in the sky. I can move it wherever I want, but that's going to show me whatever is my active camera. So for this camera, let's say this camera lasts for the duration of that first clip of the animation, and then I want this second camera, I want that to start, I don't know, somewhere around here and last for a bit of time. All right, so let's just push play and see what this looks like. There we go. So we have 2 shots here now. There. Maybe then the next shot, we want to see him approaching the lake. So let's take camera 2 and let's clone this. It's so cool that we can have multiple shots in here, and this will cut back and forth to those. So now let's take this new camera. So here we're going to come over here. And yeah, it might be cool if he's right up next to us. Okay, I'm liking that. All right, so we've got this approaching the ice. I'm thinking to really sell that this is our starting shot, let's do a dissolve in. We'll fade in from black. So that's really easy to do. Now it's very clear what we've got going on here. All right, so now let's start to think story here. I don't want to just have this be a mechanical process of somebody walking through. So we've shown from a distance there's a guy struggling to go forward through the snow. Then our second shot here we show, and he's this mighty prince person. We can we'll end up making sure we can see that crown, and then we cut to show. What is he going towards? He's going towards this lake. And then I think we sell something interesting of him stepping out onto the lake. In other words, I don't want him to just walk out and dump a potion on the lake and the girl come up. I want there to be, this is the enchanted forest, and so I want there to be something magical about this. And so I guess what I'm thinking about is, what if when he steps out onto the lake here, he gets to this edge, what if the second that his foot hits the ice, the snow just stops? I think that would be a cool thing. Start to really sell some of the magic of this world, so that the viewer is getting ready for this magic potion. Right? We haven't told them there's magic in this world yet, so let's do that. Okay, so the way that I'm going to do that, I need to get another copy of this layer. So let's clone this again. We get a lot of leverage, out of this. Just this one cycle that we made. Yep, I'm grabbing the right thing. And let's offset it so that when we cut away, we can teleport him forward again. Yep. And this one, I think this shot, so that we can really, really be clear, I want to be pretty close up on his feet. This is our fourth shot. Let's grab this camera. And I can grab it with one hand, or I can grab it with two hands, and I get this nice steady cam feel to it, which is a lot of fun. And all right, so I'm going to, let's think about where we were. The previous shot we were looking behind him. So I want to maybe be a little bit more on the edge of the ice. And let's zoom in. I think a 50 is going to be nice for this. Yep, and let's see how he walks. So we're going to need to pan the camera over, but I think that's good. And I think as soon as he comes to a stop, and we see that cape settle, we need to cut to show that he sees that the snow is happening, and to give us a better view of what's going on up in the sky. All right, and at this camera angle, for this one, we want to be nice and low, looking up at him. So just going to zoom in this entire scene. Yeah, we're really looking up at him, kind of a 3/4 angle. Great. And then once we cut to this camera angle, let's give him a facial expression change. and we'll have him kind of turn. What's great is I can see from the camera view what he's doing here. And I'll grab his eyes. And yeah, just really quick, I don't want to take tons of time with this. But let's, I'll grab his eye and I'll make that hit now a mouth where he's going like, all right. All right, so he's walking in, all right. So here, and he sees that the snow comes to a stopping point. All right, so then from here, we'll have him walk, 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 and now we need a new camera. So same idea. Maybe I'll think about what camera had a nice focal length for a shot. I'll grab camera 3. That's close enough, and I'll move it up to the top. I like to have my cameras just kind of sequentially going upward. It just seems to make more logical sense to me. And yeah, I think I want a somewhat high angle camera. And I'm picturing that the camera will kind of move in and follow and kind of stop up above. So we're kind of trying to hint to the viewer there is something of importance in this lake. So now we need to introduce the magic potion. I want a shot at this point that is going to show us him, the prince, pulling out the potion. And I'm going to go, I was pretty high in the previous shot in terms of the altitude of the camera, and I think for this shot I want to be pretty low. You know, again, we're forcing the audience to really think about what might be underneath the water there. In fact, we could go really low. That might actually be a nicer angle. The great thing is we can change this at any point and we don't have to redraw. It's absolutely my favorite thing about this. All right, now we need a pose of him pulling out the potion. Now I'm going to imagine that on this previous pose, he was kind of reaching in. Yep, reaching into something, the invisible pocket that he's got here. And I'll have him pulling it out. So, you know, again, this is all just about being economical. And let's draw ourselves a potion. So I think for something like this, let's give ourselves something, you know, big enough to really read. And let's make this really pop. We talked about earlier how the princess's colors are going to be potentially like something purplish. So I think that's a great opportunity to use that color. And maybe we'll give a bit of like a highlight to it. Yeah, make it feel like glass a little. Nice. Okay. So there's our potion bottle, and then he pulls off the cork. Right. So let's do that. Have him look down and kind of tilt down, and then we want to see him pour it. I'm going to be really, you know, just economical, trying not to redraw any more than I have to. But let's do this. Pours it. I love so much about this is that it is so easy now to have him pour it onto the ground. So he pours it onto the ground. Fantastic. And what I love is that we'll be able to come in here and animate the camera kind of panning down to start to see this stuff, which is really fantastic. And it becomes really important, but it's so nice that I can see the timing of my edit in VR, that I don't have to hop out to some other program. Each of these cameras can be totally separate, and I can change their timing, and I don't have to worry about messing up previous shots. Or each camera can have separate focal lengths, use different lenses. So, okay. From here, what we want to see is the result of this potion. What happens to it? Yeah, I think a shot kind of like I'm looking from here seems to make sense. We were over here, and then we cut kind of over his shoulder and up above. Some effects have started to happen, and I want him to kind of take a couple steps back. Bring the potion bottle backwards, and what we're going to do is we're going to just hide it, just to make our lives easier. Like he brings it back into his cloak, and because the camera's angle is going to be over here, we can just, in the next pose, get rid of it. We would need to improve these drawings, but this is kind of our quick thumbnail pop through. We need to block in some of these effects, or at least her form starting to take shape down underneath the ice there. And I think what we want is her body to start forming around like the heart. Oh, wouldn't that be cool if this was heart-shaped? Yeah, that might be a fun detail for the future. I'm going to have her kind of floating in a pose like something like this. Maybe let her dress kind of hang down a little bit more. And now we can start to animate this a little bit. So let's think about this. Let's have her be like lower, almost like she's rising up from the depths. And then we want her to fade in. And this is another thing that I just really love about working with layers, both cameras and characters, is I can just fade this in just like a track in a video editing program. Now that she is here underneath the water, we're going to need to let some kind of energy build, and then we want her to start kind of rising up, and then I'm just going to think about what her final kind of pose is here, so that I'm working towards this. I guess the final thing that she's going to do is turn her head down and then open her eyes. There we go. All right, nice and simple, kind of like his. Okay, let's see how that looks. She's rising up. Okay, he pours the liquid. We cut to this shot where we see the effects building. She comes to the surface and pulls through. All right, now in this drawing, I kind of want, when he reacts like this, I want him to kind of pull back a little bit. Yeah, I really want to get this energy when he starts to notice it. I love this. I can just kind of add force backwards this way and add a little force this way. And so we get this kind of, what is that? And he just wants to be with her. So he's just reaching out. He's like, what? What is this? My love, my long lost love. Yeah. Okay, cool. That's powerful. We've got some of these nice angled lines looking up towards her. Feels like there's definitely more story to tell with this. This is a lot of fun. What do we need to see? We need to see just a tear run down his face. And I think that's going to be enough for this session here. I think this one was camera 7. Let's clone it. We'll then have that camera essentially fade out at the end. Yeah, ideally I'd have them come together and start dancing and kind of have this beautiful ending. And I think that's for a later time. All right, let's get this camera, and I want to have this be a nice zoomed in angle. Yeah, we need his teary face. All right. Yeah, I'll grab this tear. Let's start to fade it out. We've got this tear. And it's beautiful. And even though we haven't animated any of the cameras yet, let's just see how this is cutting together watching our theater camera here. I'm just going to push play. All right, he's tromping through the forest, making his way towards the lake, and as soon as he steps on it, the snow stops. He proceeds, pulls out his potion, dumps it onto the ground. And the love of his life is there with him once again. Aww. Very cool. All right, so the last steps here in terms of getting this to the point where it's legible, I think, is we need some effects that motivate him stepping back here. So let's get kind of this purple color. I'm going to make 12 frames. Let's try 12 frames. And I'm going to just loop that over and over again. And I'm going to have this energy traveling up and into the center here. Let's see. Okay, that's cool. All right, so now I have this effect loop, the effect of all this energy building up and taking, coming together into this heart that we have here. The thing that needs to happen now is it needs to not loop, and that's one thing that I really like about this is I can have this layer looping, but for a specific period of time. So I want it to start fading in around this time, and I want to let it loop until we get her all the way up through here. And then we want this to kind of fade out. And this is a really fun thing that we can do here. So I can fade it, and that will cross dissolve it in, which is cool, but we can make it even cooler in a second. So let's see, after she comes through, let's give this a nice long slow fade out. Now that this is fading, we can control how that fade happens, and we have this fade designer, and what I'm going to do is tell it to randomly fade different strokes at different times. And I want to fade the thickness along the lines. And this can be a little bit tricky to see until I step through it here. But what it's going to do is it's going to start out with the lines being very thin, and then they're going to get thicker and thicker. So we're going to fade the width along the line. Let me do that with the opacity as well as the thickness. So what we'll see here is it starts from just like almost tiny little particles, and then those strokes kind of fill into their full form. And right now it's going to do the same thing as they fade out, so that they'll kind of become these tiny little particles that dissolve away. And I think that's going to give us kind of a nicer, more interesting transitional element here. And now let's go in and do our final pass of animating the camera. So I'll hop back to the beginning. Let's grab that first camera, camera 1. All right, so there's that wandering. So I think with this, it's an establishing shot. I just kind of want to pan along with the character. Maybe we'll do a little bit of dollying as well. And so we're kind of like pushing the viewer into the scene. So let's 3, 2, 1, recording. Okay. Now let's skip back to the beginning. Okay, that's cool. It's cool. I really don't like where that tree is just landing us. So let's fix that. I think probably the easiest way to fix it is just move the tree. It needs to be more here. Yeah, the other thing that could be kind of cool here, just from a design standpoint, is the wind is blowing so hard. What if all of these trees are kind of leaning away from the wind? I mean, that's a very natural thing. If the wind is consistently blowing one direction, our trees are going to be bent by it. Yeah, we get this really cool sense that, man, this is quite a storm. All right, so we go from here to there. Now, I want to think about how one shot cuts to the next. So I see him here, and when we cut to this shot, our eye needs to hop over here and then look up to his face. So we want to adjust this. I think I'm going to adjust the way that this shot works a little bit so that it better hooks up to that following shot. And so one way I can do this is I can take the whole layer and I can offset, let me get to this camera, I can offset this camera with all of its animation, right? So if I put it down here, it's still going to play exactly the same. It's just the camera is in an offset position. So let's make a more subtle change to this. And we'll just shift the camera like that. Then let's see where we start out if we make that change. So it starts there. I think that's good. And then I just need to go in and I need to move my trees. Cool. I'm liking that. All right, so we've got our first shot. Now let's come over to this camera. We'll go back to its starting frame. So he travels to there. Okay, good. I can do this. I'm going to shrink down the room so that I can start at this position and kind of pull the camera backwards. Go 3, 2, 1. Great. I like it. Now that all the cameras have been added, I went in and dropped some sound effects in 3D space and refined a couple of things. Then I exported the final sequence into After Effects to add a little bit of glow in a couple of places, but really only spent about 15 minutes outside of VR before getting to this final state. Let's take a look at that result. And there we go. One of the things that I love about working in this space is I have a set that somebody can go in and start refining and sketching in a little bit more detail. And we can start to solve some questions like, how big does our set need to be? How expansive does it need to be? All of the strokes that you see that are drawn and animated here, and all of the cameras can be exported to Maya or whatever program we're using to do our CG animation. Usually when we're done with storyboards, we haven't solved so much spatial questions as what we've done here today in an hour's time. One thing that I wasn't in love with this pass was just how roughly I had drawn the prince character, for instance, to really make sure that we got this idea in the time that we had to work with. So let me show you a time lapse here where I take the rough prince character and I'm going to take him onto a transparent layer and start sketching over him, refining and polishing off the design. The final character you'll see here is posable, so I can storyboard with this in another sequence if I want. It's still easy to work with and select things as I tell my story. I hope you enjoyed this look into what it is to create pre-production art in VR. It's really intuitive and fun to draw sculpturally in 3D space and bring something into existence that you can walk around and stand next to. Now is a great time to start learning and jumping into VR to make spatial art. It's going to be a huge part of pipelines of tomorrow. I hope to see you there. Cheers.
So let's just dive into the questions now. So we have like a few questions from the audience, which I just have to scroll quickly just to check them again. So one question is, this is yet another new way to draw digitally. Is it difficult to learn, and how, wait a second, now the question disappeared. Wait a second. How long does it take to actually learn the program or to master it?
Sure. And I talk to people about that a lot. It looks and seems very different from the traditional way that we create. Drawing in 3D is it's something that we all take a little bit of time to adapt to. I remember when I first hopped into VR and started sketching and painting and exploring tilt brush and quill and AnimVR. Everything I drew was perfectly flat. So I remember drawing this character and I looked from the side and I was drawing it as though I was on paper. It really only took a few hours once I had the right mindset to start thinking about, I'm not drawing outlines around characters, but I'm drawing forms and I'm kind of wrapping strokes around a form that's in my mind. For me, that made a lot of sense because I tend to think spatially, a little bit better spatially, in that when I'm drawing on paper, I especially as I was learning, I always struggled with which lines to make to create the form. And when you're making something in front of you, it feels more like almost like you're sketching sculpture. And because you can see it and move around it, some of the issues like foreshortening that happen, when we're drawing, kind of wrestling with that, you don't have that when you're drawing in 3D. So there are some things that are just a different mindset, and some things that are a little bit easier about drawing in 3D. I'd say in terms of time, I think you have to give yourself permission to suck a bit, to be really bad at drawing for a little bit again, and so all of us, it's like any new tool that you get. I know when a lot of my friends were transitioning from, being really comfortable in Photoshop to even just drawing with an Apple Pencil on an iPad, there's a shift in drawing on that new type of surface. And I think this is just another thing where, you have to give yourself a couple weeks really to get comfortable doing it. And in terms of mastery, I mean, I'll let you know when I've mastered it. That's kind of, a years down the line thing. I would say, I think about, 2 to 3 weeks of, an hour a day or so playing with this. And I became really comfortable. And I wasn't thinking about which tool or button I was pressing. And at this point, I think I've almost hit about 10,000 hours in VR.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it's been a few years now, and it's as second nature as, working in Maya or Photoshop or any of the other softwares that we use. That's a great question.
Is it actually AnimVR that you started out, or like VR tool, or was it a different one?
Yeah, AnimatekaPRO was one of the early ones that I ended up really investing in, because at that point it was the only one where you could do animation. I first explored, and the first thing that made me run out and need to buy a headset was seeing Glenn Keane drawing in Tilt Brush. And that blew my mind. And as soon as I got to play with Tilt Brush, I got to see some of its strengths and some of the things that I really wanted it to do that it didn't do. And I bumped into the AnimVR developers online. I was looking to see, what can I do for animation in VR? And they were really receptive to, giving me a build very early on. And the feedback loop has been really fantastic, talking to them and working with the developers of AnimVR. So that's kind of been the primary tool that I have been using. Even though it's not my first, it's maybe my first love.
That's good. So we have like another question from David, and he says, AnimVR seems great for production, but I don't often hear about it being used. That's part one of the question. And maybe just answer this first, and then we go to the second one.
Totally. Yes. And I think VR tools aren't loudly used at this point at a lot of studios, although almost every studio that I interact with, whether it's game or film or TV, has some little department or a couple of enthusiasts that are really using this and making use of it. I think the tricky thing when I talk to people at any studio, whether it's my friends that work at Disney or people that work at small mobile game studios, is trying to convince people that have spent their entire careers working one way to try something new. And it's also, how do you sell this to the producers and say, oh no, just give us time to kind of train on something new. It's usually us enthusiasts that work on the side that will poke around with it and experiment. That said, there's a lot that's going on that you just aren't maybe necessarily hearing about. There's a couple of studios that I've worked with under NDA that I can't really talk about the projects, but working with Aardman, working with Industrial Light and Magic, we've done a number of tests to see how these things can fit into the pipeline. And virtual production as a concept is really growing quickly. We see it in shows like The Mandalorian, where there's a lot of that going on. And so I think, if it's sexy enough to show off, people are starting to put it in behind the scenes features, and I only expect it to grow from there.
Yeah, I mean, you are in the space for quite some time now, and me too. And for us, it kind of looks like it's not moving fast enough. At least for me, that's how I perceive it. And like people slowly are getting into it, and slowly it's getting more popular. But we are still like way ahead of those that just start now. So sometimes it's a bit strange for me, at least, to be in this space and not seeing like much more progression than I would love to see. So the next part of the question of David was, Quill and Tilt Brush seem more popular, but they also feel like they can lack a bit of finesse or commercial production. And furthermore, it goes, does Joe think AnimVR is a good tool to branch all these stages of commercial production, or is it still best for the rapid storyboarding stage?
Yeah, that's a really fantastic question. I think it's going to be really interesting to see over the next couple of years where the software positions itself. Um, I'd say right now, AnimVR has the most production application, and it's because you can get a lot of things into it and a lot of things out of it. And that's one of the big strengths of it over Tilt Brush and Quill. Tilt Brush has some really fantastic texture brushes and brushes that react to audio, and so it's been really useful in performances and more abstract pieces tied to music. It's been really great. I think there's questions about how invested is Google in VR going forward.
Not so much anymore.
Yeah, they've
like they're
for
shutting
those
down everything right now.
Yeah, for people who haven't heard, they have Google Poly was a great resource for holding 3D models, and that's recently over the next few months that's kind of going to be disbanded. So there's a lot of people that have questions about how easy is it going to be to share our Tilt Brush drawings and things. Now on the other side, you have Facebook with Quill. And there's some really beautiful things about that app. I think as I talk to the developers and socially I interact with a lot of the developers on many of these apps, the focus that Facebook has with Quill is really to make it a tool for building these interactive VR experiences, and not as much for supporting existing pipelines. And that's something that whenever I talk to their team, I'm always pushing, can you guys make this as a tool where honestly, I'd love to do drawovers in dailies of animation by, importing a cache of my animation and being able to sketch in 3D the same way that, we sketch and draw over in 2D. Why not help the animator even more by saying, no, draw this line. He needs to go here in 3D space. And I think these tools could be so much better. And I think that's where AnimVR has the strength of you can, import Alembic files. You can bring your cameras in, you can bring your cameras out. And right now it's the only tool that can do that. And then I guess the last thing I'd say on this topic would be that, AnimVR is made by two guys, two Germans, who were like, hey, can we make something animation-y and fun? They're both programmers, and so when we connected and all the artists that have connected with them, it's kind of them been learning what does an animator want. So it's been a really fascinating thing to see that a small team can create something that gets out there to the world. The thing that they need is they need users, they need people to make cool things, give them money, that kind of thing, so that it can grow. And I think that's the thing about VR right now is that it's there's a lot of funding that needs to get to all these projects to make sure that they survive and that they grow.
Absolutely. So, but in the same go, what would be your dream VR tool then?
Yeah, well, some of the areas that I'm starting to explore, as I've been in this VR space for a few years now, I'm starting to prototype my own 3D animation tool. What I think the gap that I'm looking to fill, which there's a program called Tavori, which is also a really promising app. You can do a lot there as well. It's kind of the more traditional CG kind of character rig based approach to what you can do in AnimVR with sketching. I'd like to see a tool where we take puppetry and stop motion and this idea of working with a puppet and be able to combine them. And I think that's the tool that is probably coming next, is the refinement in the process where you have a character and you can kind of in real time record that puppet bouncing through your scene, and then strip it down to its poses and then start to, like almost in a layered stop motion approach, pose that character as a puppet, pose by pose and frame by frame. It's such a fast workflow to do. We just need the software to be developed and the tools to improve towards that. But if you think about it, when we're animating in 3D and in a traditional pipeline where I'm using a mouse, keyboard, Cintiq screen, I have to move a character in 2 dimensions, to like pose a hand, and then I have to rotate my camera around and move it again. And so you're always actually working in 2D and just changing your perspective. And the amazing thing about working in VR is it's the first time that I can actually grab a part and move it exactly where I want to put it in 3D space in the same way that a stop motion animator just pushes the puppet, from one position to the next. And it's something that, we've adapted to these inefficient workflows of working on a screen, that once you experience posing in VR, even though we don't always have the tools yet to get the most polished and refined details like you might in Maya, blocking in animation is 10 times faster easily when you're doing it spatially. So I envision a pipeline where CG animators may polish their shots very similarly for a while to what they do now, but to start off by either recording your body as that character or puppeteering that character through a space is a much faster way to work. And it's, just a few development cycles of code away from getting us there.
Yeah. How many years do you think it will take until XR tools are like a standard in the industry?
That's a great question. So I think the thing I've discovered as I've, gone to be lead and animation director at different studios, when I work with animators, and specifically character animators, but really through a lot of the pipeline, animators hate change. I've worked with animators that have many, many years of experience at Pixar and Disney, and it's so hard sometimes to get them to use new techniques, even just in Maya. People get so comfortable doing things the hard way that they're really, really good at doing things in extremely hard ways. So I think that's actually one of the biggest barriers that we have. I think it's going to be a generational shift, and I'm really excited when I see student filmmakers, people in college who are experimenting with these techniques, because what it's going to take is they're learning these things as it's developing. They graduate and get hired at a studio, and they come to their leads and say, hey, I can do this faster and cheaper with these new techniques. Can we get some time to try that? I think that's what I'm seeing needing to happen. And that's how a lot of shifts, in the animation industry happened. If you think the shift in compositing from After Effects to Nuke, largely was people graduated from college having learned this stuff, and it gave them job opportunities that they could step into, and they were able to show the studios, hey, there's this great new stuff out there. And I think that's probably going to take 4 or 5 years to really happen. But I would be shocked if in 10 years we're still animating.
Yeah, me too.
It would be really sad. I think some terrible financial disaster across the planet would have to happen, or something for us to still be working in this old-fashioned way.
Absolutely. So we have like another question from David again, and he asks, does Joe get more fatigue from VR art working process? If so, does that counterbalance the speed of creating the art?
Great question. And so I'll try to be brief, but I'll back up a little bit in terms of like history. You back up to like people chiseling stone and making sculptures, and those guys were ripped. Like I don't know if you've ever chiseled marble or stone, but it is hard work. And you build these massive bodies. Even when I was in art school and I was taking 4 or 5 hours of drawing every day, it's just standing and working that way. I was in much better shape, even just doing from art. Compared to sitting hunched over at a computer. And you look at people kind of bent over their Cintiqs, and our posture gets really bad. One of the great things about working in VR is whether you're sitting or whether you're standing. I prefer to stand. I'm using my full body, my whole range of motion, and so I'm actually healthier. The blood is flowing more, and I'm better able in a lot of ways to create for longer periods of time.
Instead of being hunched.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the one thing though is, yes, you do have a headset that's on your face. And I do find that when you're starting out, you want to start with half an hour at a time. Eventually, just like anything, you're going to build the muscles to do that thing. So if you build it up, your neck muscles and everything will improve to the point where I have no problem at this point. And really, after about 6 months to a year of doing a good bit of consistent VR, I can put in 8 hours in VR, with breaks, without finding myself debilitated the next day. But you do have to give yourself time, just like anything.
Yeah. So we have one more question, and then we're actually done for the Q&A
All right.
session. And the question is, how transferable the visualization in AnimVR are to other 3D apps, such as Blender? Can you transfer animated characters?
Yes. So the great thing is anything that you can do in AnimVR, and that involves posing 3D models, you can create lights, you can create sky domes, and you can bake out your scene to a skybox that you can bring in as a background image, all of your drawing strokes, your cameras, and even you can, in AnimVR, you can record sound. You don't just have to import it, you can record it with the mic in the headset. All of that can be exported and brought in as an Alembic file, and then your separate image and sound assets can be brought right into Blender, Maya, whatever your package is, and used from there. Yeah, I have a piece, that you can check out on, Twitter, Instagram, that kind of thing, where I drew things in AnimVR, brought them into Blender, and created some lights, and it's a character running around in a circle and smashing through a wall. And both with Gravity Sketch for doing a little bit of VR modeling and AnimVR for animating it. That was all created in VR, but then brought to kind of plus up and render out in Blender.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here today or this morning for you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and have like a very nice day still.
Yes, thank you. You too. And thanks for everybody who checked this out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Enjoyed, and get yourself a headset.
Absolutely. All right, then. Thank you very much, and see you around, I guess.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.